On our daughter's first birthday, my husband whispered he couldn't wait for me to leave so he could start a real life with his ex. Been living 2 blocks away on my dime. He said this family was a mistake, while secretly transferring our savings to her. Then told me suck it up for stability. So I handed CPS everything and watched his world collapse. He leaned close while everyone was laughing, the smell of frosting and baby lotion thick in the air. Our daughter's first birthday. I was cutting the cake, smiling for pictures, pretending we were a happy family. Then he leaned in, brushed his lips near my ear, and whispered, "I can't wait for you to leave so I can start my real life with her." I froze. I thought I misheard him. But when I turned, his eyes were cold, steady, like he'd been rehearsing that line. I asked, barely breathing, "What did you just say?" He smirked. "You heard me. This family was a mistake." Then he walked off to grab another drink, leaving me holding the knife, our baby squealing in her high chair, frosting smeared on her cheeks like war paint. I kept smiling, for the guests, for the pictures, for my baby, but inside I felt the floor vanish. Later that night, when everyone left, I confronted him again. He acted like I was overreacting. Said I was emotional, tired, maybe postpartum. But I knew what I heard. That whisper replayed in my head like a song I couldn't turn off. Then, 2 days later, I noticed something else. Our joint savings account looked off. Smaller. A few thousand missing. When I asked, he shrugged. Just moved it for investments. But the pattern was strange, tiny withdrawals every few days, always on the same route home from work. I started digging. Receipts hidden in his glove compartment. A second phone bill under his name with a different address. And then one afternoon, when I typed the address into Google Maps, my stomach dropped 2 blocks away. His ex. The one he said he never even talks to anymore. They'd been together in college. He told me she was a closed chapter. I guess he just meant temporarily closed. Because I recognized her handwriting on a delivery slip stuck in his jacket pocket. She'd signed for a package I'd paid for. Our money. Our future. Our daughter's college fund. Funding her rent, her bills, her life. I sat on the floor of the nursery, our baby asleep in my lap, staring at the pastel mural I painted when I was still stupidly in love. The one with the quote, "Family is forever." I realized he was right about one thing. This was a mistake. The next morning, when he got ready for work, I asked, "Are you happy?" He gave me that blank look, the one that used to scare me when he was pretending not to care. "I'm stable," he said, "and you should be grateful for that, so suck it up." Then he left for work, and I sat there watching his taillights fade. That's when I decided to stop being his stability, but instead of screaming, I smiled. I made breakfast, I played along. And quietly I started collecting bank statements, texts, proof of the transfers, his messages with her, even recordings of him saying the words. Because if he wanted to play games, I was going to end it with rules he didn't make. And when I found out what else he'd done with her, the thing that could destroy his job and reputation completely, I realized I didn't just have proof. I had power, and I knew exactly who would be very interested in seeing it all. We met in Chicago, summer after I graduated college. I was 23, working my first real job as a marketing assistant, still living off instant ramen and daydreams. He was older, 30, confident, with a nice watch and that effortless kind of charm that makes you forget to look closer. He bought me flowers after our first date, called me his piece after our second. I thought I'd finally found the grown-up version of love, stable, mature, safe. What I didn't realize then was that he didn't love me for who I was. He loved me for what I could do for him. He was a financial analyst, good with numbers, good with words, but bad with honesty. In the beginning, he used work stress as an excuse for his cold moods, said he just needed someone who could keep things smooth. And I took that as a challenge instead of a warning. The first real red flag came 8 months in. We were supposed to go to his friend's engagement party. He canceled last minute, said he was too tired. A week later, I saw photos on Facebook him, in a suit at that party, standing next to a woman I didn't know. She was gorgeous, polished, the kind of woman who looks like she owns every room she walks into. Her hand was on his arm in one photo. Her name was Lydia. When I asked, he said, "Oh, that's my ex." She just showed up. "You're not going to make this a thing, right?" I should have walked then. But he cried, actually cried, and told me she was just a ghost from his past. I believed him. 2 years later, we got married. A small courthouse wedding, then dinner with close friends. He said big weddings were a waste of money. I told myself I agreed. I didn't want to admit I just wanted him. Our daughter was born 3 years later. He was weird about the pregnancy, distant, distracted. Claimed he was anxious about being a dad. When I went into labor, he missed the first half because he lost track of time getting gas. But when he finally showed, he played the perfect husband, hand-holding, forehead kisses, crying when she was born. The nurses thought he was wonderful. But after we brought her home, something shifted. He started spending longer at work. Late-night client calls. Always keeping his phone face down. I asked him once if something was wrong, and he said, "You're exhausting to talk to lately." I blamed myself. Postpartum fog, sleepless nights. Maybe I was too emotional. That's what he told me every time I questioned anything. "You're just hormonal," or "You twist things in your head." That became the rhythm of our marriage. Me doubting, him dismissing. Me apologizing, him collecting power. Until the day I found that folded-up receipt for a package addressed to Lydia, 2 blocks from our house. That's when I started replaying every single red flag in my mind, like reruns of a show I used to love, but can't stand anymore. The late nights, the sudden cash withdrawals, the way he'd disappear right after dinner and come home smelling like her perfume, the one he once said he hated. And now, after his whisper at our daughter's birthday, I realized something even darker. He didn't just cheat. He built a double life right under my nose, funded by the money I helped earn. But what he didn't realize, what he could never imagine, was that I still had access to everything. The accounts, the insurance, his work files, even the Ring camera he forgot I set up in our living room. And when I started connecting the dots, I saw something much bigger than infidelity. He wasn't just betraying me. He was committing crimes. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept replaying the birthday whisper over and over, like it was a recording stuck on repeat in my skull. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined him with her, laughing in my living room, pretending nothing was wrong while our daughter slept 2 rooms away. The next morning, I decided I had to see it for myself. I told myself it wasn't about suspicion, it was about survival. So I borrowed a coworker's car, stayed 2 blocks behind him and watched. He didn't go to work, not that day. He parked in a small complex I didn't know, a building that looked ordinary from the street but had private entrances to the apartments. And then he slipped inside, right into Lydia's apartment. I kept my distance, hiding behind a dumpster. I saw him carry in groceries, a bottle of wine, and a small box wrapped in paper that looked suspiciously like cash. He laughed at something she said, real, loud laughter. Not the polite, staged laugh he gave me when I told him about my day. And then I saw the moment that made my blood run cold. He pulled out his phone and typed something fast, glanced around, then slipped the envelope under her doormat. I couldn't see the contents, but I knew. I knew it was our money. Every penny we saved, every sacrifice I'd made, every we're building our future promise gone. And all of it funding this other life 2 blocks from ours. I didn't confront him that day. I didn't call him. I just watched, hidden, as he kissed her on the cheek, whispered sweet nothings, then left. But not before checking his car carefully, making sure there were no receipts or clues. That night, I went through our finances in painstaking detail. And it wasn't just a few thousand here and there. He'd been transferring our savings systematically for months. Every time I thought we were saving for a down payment or daycare, it was already being siphoned off to her. I called our bank, asked for statements going back 6 months. And then I froze when I saw the pattern. Every other Friday, right after payday, he'd withdraw a sum slightly below the alert threshold. He'd deposit it into an account in her name or a shell account she controlled. He'd lied about taxes, insurance, and bills to cover it up. It was deliberate, calculated. And he thought I was too naive, too tired, too wrapped up in motherhood to notice. I felt 2 emotions at once, fury and fear. Fury because this was a betrayal on every level: marriage, family, trust. Fear because I realized how much power he had quietly amassed, and I knew I couldn't fight him alone. Not yet. I needed proof, documentation, something that would not just confront him, but expose him in a way he could never recover from. I started quietly taking screenshots of his emails, bank transfers, and even recorded a few conversations he initiated while bragging about how easy it is to keep everything under control. Then, as I sat in the nursery that night, watching my daughter sleep, I realized He wasn't just trying to steal our money, he was trying to steal my life. And I wasn't going to let that happen. But the more I dug, the more I realized something even more horrifying, something that could ruin not just him, but everything he thought he could hide. And it all came down to a secret he didn't even know I had access to. I thought I had him cornered. Every transfer, every lie, every whispered promise he'd broken, I had it all documented. But what I didn't expect was the other layer of betrayal that hit me like a punch to the gut. It started innocently enough. I was going through our old emails for more proof when I stumbled on a thread between him and someone I never imagined. Our daughter's pediatrician. At first, I thought it was normal checkup reminders. Then I read closer. My stomach dropped. He had emailed the pediatrician, requesting medical information about our daughter, dates, vaccinations, even recent weight and growth reports. But he'd phrased it in a way that made it sound like I had consented. Only I hadn't. He had lied, and lied to everyone in our lives. And the kicker, in the same email thread, he mentioned transferring funds to Lydia, not just for rent, but for emergency expenses and to keep the family stable while she got on her feet. He wasn't just cheating emotionally and financially. He was using our daughter as a pawn in his scheme. He'd been planning this new life with her while pretending to be the perfect dad to me. Every smile in front of family, every bedtime story, every photo posted online, it was a performance. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just infidelity. This was premeditated. He had been slowly siphoning everything I worked for, grooming her ex 2 blocks away, and building a parallel life under my nose while using me as the front. I felt bile rise in my throat, but I couldn't let it show. I had to be smart. I had to play along. I started recording his calls, backing up his texts, saving screenshots, and secretly tracking every transaction he made. I had enough evidence to not only confront him, but to ruin him in ways he couldn't even imagine. Then came the night that almost broke me. He got home late, drunk, laughing about how easy it all is. He pulled out his phone, showed me a video he'd sent Lydia of our daughter playing, and said with a smirk, "Isn't it funny? She doesn't even know I'm giving her a better future than she could ever have with you." He thought he was clever, that he had outsmarted me, that I would keep silent because I needed stability. But that's when I realized something terrifying and exhilarating. He had underestimated one thing: I had the right people to go to. And they weren't just going to scold him, they could bring the full weight of the law down on him, and he wouldn't be able to spin a word of it. I contacted Child Protective Services the next morning. I handed over every document, every recording, every bank statement, every proof of lies. I didn't sugarcoat it. I laid it all out. And I didn't leave room for excuses. And just like that, his stable, perfect life began to unravel. The calls, the meetings, the questions, they started coming. His boss, the bank, the pediatrician's office, all of them. And as the walls started closing in, I realized something horrifying. He still had no idea the real twist I had in store. Because this wasn't just about exposing him. It was about watching him crumble in the same way he made me feel for years. I don't know when the part of me that kept quiet turned into the part that would not. Maybe it was the way his whisper at the birthday cut through the cake and laughter like a knife. Maybe it was the look on my daughter's face when she reached for him and he pulled away like I was the better option. Whatever it was, I stopped being afraid of making noise. First, I stopped pretending any of this could be fixed privately. I stopped hoping for a confession at 3 in the morning while the baby slept on my chest. The part of me that had spent years smoothing edges and apologizing learned to be ugly and thorough. I mapped everything out on a legal pad: dates, account numbers, screenshots, emails, recordings. I made copies, I made backups. I printed enough paper to wallpaper the nursery. I already had CPS on the line from the last part. That was my opening move. But CPS was only the beginning. I scheduled a meeting with an attorney who specialized in family and financial fraud. I wasn't trying to get even for the thrill. I wanted walls built around my daughter, and the truth filed where it couldn't be rewritten. The lawyer listened, asked one sharp question after another, and then told me words I had needed to hear for months. "We can freeze transfers. We can file emergency motions. But we move fast, and we move clean." I took every scrap of evidence to professionals who could turn it into something a court would respect. Bank statements were certified. Texts and emails were time-stamped and backed up to cloud storage. Recordings were transcribed. The pediatrician's emails, the ones he sent trying to make his lies look like consent, were highlighted and copied. I didn't send threats or post anything online. I let the paper do the yelling. But paperwork alone doesn't make a life fall apart, so I started pulling threads he'd left exposed. I called the bank fraud department and asked for their review team to look at suspicious transfers. I contacted his employer's HR with proof that he'd been misrepresenting finances, enough to worry them about legal exposure. I didn't invent anything. I showed them the truth: unauthorized transfers, shell accounts, email chains that painted a picture of deliberate deception. I told them my only goal was protecting my daughter. They understood the risk to their company if he was under investigation and kept my contact info. I also did something I never thought I would, something that felt like betrayal and salvation at once. I reached out to Lydia. I didn't scream, I didn't beg. I told her exactly what I knew and showed her the receipts. She didn't cry. She didn't lie. She was flat, practical, and shocked in a way that made my skin crawl, shocked because he had lied to her too, about his status, about money, about what he planned to do to our family. Then she said something that stopped me cold. "You should know he's not careful with other things. He's sloppy with passwords and papers. If you want your daughter safe, you'll go after the accounts and the files now." She didn't become an ally so much as a mirror showing me how far down the rabbit hole he'd dug. I tightened my perimeter. I changed passwords, updated beneficiaries where I could legally do so, arranged for emergency childcare contingencies, and kept living like nothing had happened. Because that was the most dangerous weapon I had. Normalcy. He bragged on the phone like nothing cared for him. He kept drinking, kept laughing, kept assuming I would play my role. I let him and I recorded everything. The plan was not about humiliation. It was surgical. I wanted irreversible protection for my child and accountability for a man who thought he could buy his way out of consequences. I wanted him to understand, in a way that mattered, that you can't build a second life on other people's trust without it collapsing like a house of cards. I thought I knew every angle. I thought I had anticipated every move. Then, laying out the final set of documents to my lawyer the night before we filed the emergency motion, I found something in his emails that made my fingers go numb. It wasn't just money he'd been moving. It was a promise he'd made to someone I never expected, a promise that would change everything. I found it tucked in the corner of his email inbox, a thread buried under months of work, messages, and reminders for Lydia. It was short, almost casual, but the words burned. "Once she's gone, we'll have everything. I'll handle it. No one else can know, not even the baby's mother." My hands shook as I read it over and over. I had assumed his betrayal was messy and greedy, but this was deliberate planning at a level I hadn't imagined. He wasn't just moving money or lying about Lydia. He was planning for me to leave, to remove me from the picture entirely. At first, I couldn't believe it. I reread the emails, traced IPs, dates, timestamps. Everything confirmed it. He'd been setting up a scenario where my absence, me quitting my job, moving away, or worse, would be part of his real life with her. And then I saw another thread, between him and someone else I didn't know. A lawyer. He was consulting them under a fake name, asking for advice about custody loopholes, ways to restrict my access to our daughter, and how to manipulate accounts so I'd have no control over her finances. I realized he hadn't just been cheating. He had been preparing a full-scale erasure of me from our daughter's life, legally and financially, if I ever tried to interfere. I felt rage, terror, and an icy clarity all at once. This wasn't about emotional betrayal. This was about control, dominance, and an almost sociopathic planning of someone else's life for his convenience. I sat there for hours, my daughter asleep in her crib nearby. The weight of what he intended pressed down on me, but alongside the fear was a sharpened edge. He'd underestimated one thing: the depth of my quiet, methodical observation. The hours I'd spent gathering proof. The relationships I'd quietly built with CPS, the bank, his employer, and even Lydia. And then the final twist hit me, the one that made my stomach drop and my mind race with possibilities. In his careless overconfidence, he'd left a digital footprint that directly linked him to criminal fraud, not just emotional betrayal. Every transfer, every email, every casual brag about, making it work without her knowing, was traceable, undeniable, and documented. I realized I didn't just have the evidence to stop him from taking my daughter or our money. I had the power to destroy the entire life he had meticulously plotted, the secret world he had built, thinking no one would ever see it. I leaned back, heart racing. I could almost hear him laughing in his delusion, still believing I was the naive, exhausted wife who would just suck it up. He had no idea the storm he'd triggered by underestimating me. And that storm was about to hit him with the full force of justice, exposure, and revenge, all perfectly timed and unavoidable. By the time I was ready to move, I knew everything. Every lie, every transaction, every whispered plan he'd made in the shadows. But what made my blood run cold wasn't just the betrayal. It was why he did it, the real, horrifying reason that explained everything. It all came out when I confronted him indirectly through CPS. I didn't yell, I didn't threaten, I asked one simple question. Why? He froze. For the first time, I saw hesitation. Then, with that same cold, practiced tone he always used to dismiss me, he said, "Because I wanted more than a life. I wanted someone who would appreciate me, without the anchor of a family that didn't excite me. Her, our daughter, you were obligations, she was opportunity." At first I thought I misheard him, but then he laughed, low and cruel, like he was proud of himself. He admitted it. Every sacrifice I'd made, every sleepless night, every plan we'd built together, it meant nothing. Not because he didn't love me, not because he loved her, but because he wanted the thrill of building a life that wasn't bound by responsibility. He told me he had calculated every move. Siphoning the savings, secretly transferring funds, manipulating Lydia into thinking she was in a fairy tale, and keeping me stable, so no one would question the missing money. All of it was a game for him, a power play to show he could control everyone and everything without consequence. He didn't even care about the lies he told me, or the hurt he caused our daughter. His logic was terrifyingly simple. She doesn't understand, she'll forgive, she'll stay because she's scared, and I get what I want. He smiled as he explained it, and that smile, so casual, so arrogant, was the moment I understood the full scope of his cruelty. He didn't just want to cheat. He wanted to dominate, to bend reality to his will, and to make everyone believe he was the hero while being the villain. And the most chilling part, he believed he could get away with it. He thought he had thought of everything, except me. He never considered that I could be methodical, patient, and ruthlessly precise. That I could build a network of people who would help me dismantle his little empire. That I could take his whispered dreams of a real life and turn them into evidence that would destroy him. The realization hit me like ice water. He had been cruel and calculating all along, but his arrogance, the belief that everyone else was too weak or too naive, was his fatal flaw. He had underestimated me, and underestimation in the hands of someone who has nothing left to lose is lethal, because I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to watch him burn. I filed the emergency motion the morning after I handed CPS the last of my evidence. It felt unreal, walking into the courthouse with a folder that was heavy the way shame is heavy, full of bank prints, email threads, transcriptions, and the video of him whispering on our daughter's birthday. My lawyer moved fast. We got emergency custody papers, an immediate freeze on any accounts he controlled, and a temporary restraining order that kept him out of the house. For the first time in months, I slept without one ear listening for the sound of his keys. The bank called almost immediately. They'd flagged the transfers and reversed a portion of them. Not everything. Fraud investigations take time, but enough to stop him from emptying the house. His workplace contacted him after HR reviewed the documents I provided. Apparently, they have a lower tolerance for employees who can't explain unexplained wire activity and compromised client trust. He was suspended pending review. The look on his face, the first time he realized the transfers were traceable, like a man whose safety net had quietly turned into quicksand, was something I'll never forget. CPS did their thing. I expected them to be careful and cold and rule-bound, and they were thorough. They interviewed him, interviewed me, interviewed Lydia. She didn't sob or beg. She looked hollow, like someone who'd been promised stars and found ledgers. When she realized he'd been transferring our savings into accounts she thought were hers legitimately, she turned on him in a way I'd never seen from a woman I'd once wanted to hate. She testified. Her honesty accelerated everything. The first big public hit came when his employer's investigation uncovered irregularities that went beyond domestic matters. Client fund misreporting, unauthorized withdrawals. He was fired. The second came when the bank's fraud team referred the case to the county prosecutor. Criminal charges were filed within weeks: fraud, embezzlement, attempted financial exploitation. He spent nights in courtrooms I'd once thought I'd never see him in, watching judges read the obvious from a paper I'd handed them. He called me in the middle of it, begging and bargaining and offering to fix things if I'd drop the complaint. I played the part I'd practiced, calm, detached, more boring than his mythology. I told him the truth. I wanted my daughter safe, our savings returned, and him to never be able to manipulate us again. He asked for mercy. I gave him the law. The worst part for him wasn't the legal paperwork. It was the small social collapses that piled up. Friends who had once toasted him now avoided his calls, neighbors who pretended not to know him, his parents' quiet disappointment that was louder than any argument. The last straw was Lydia's statement to the court, cold, precise, and devoid of sentiment. He had built a house of cards on the backs of people he dismissed as obstacles. Watching it flutter apart was messy, public, and irreversible. I got full custody. The judge emphasized the pattern of manipulation, the financial exploitation, and the emotional neglect. I got the restored funds that could be proven, and I got a judge's backing to pursue the rest. It won't replace the time lost, the trust shattered, or the quiet nights he abandoned me. But it gave me something else, a future that doesn't have to include his shadow. Revenge, I learned, isn't about theatrical ruin. It's about reclaiming safety, dismantling the lie, and making sure the person who treated your life like a chessboard can't play with anyone else's pieces. He's not spectacularly destroyed. Laws and money don't always translate to poetic ends, but he's unmoored. He's lost what he thought was his entitlement: the easy adoration, the assumed stability, the secret side life. He's become the kind of man who paces court hallways and apologizes into voicemail. The baby still reaches for him sometimes, and I let her. She is two things: forgiving and intentionally unaware. I let her keep the photographs where he looks decent because she doesn't deserve the gravity of his choices. Me. I painted over the mural that said "Family is forever." I left the wall blank for a while because nothing about this felt finished. Then one night, after the last hearing, I wrote in small, crooked letters where nobody would immediately look. "We are not a mistake." He whispered that I should suck it up. I didn't. I rewired my world, and the joke's on him. He was wrong about forever. It belonged to us, not him.